Hello students, today in your algebra class we're going to be working on subtracting real numbers. So at the end of this lesson you should be able to subtract real numbers. So let's try a couple quick warm-up problems. This would be a really good time for you to pause your screen and try solving these problems on your own. Hopefully you've paused your screen and now you're just checking answers. So number 1, 12 plus negative 3. The signs are different, therefore we find their difference and keep the sign of the larger number. So this is going to be 9, and 12 is the biggest. It's positive, so positive 9. Number 5, same idea. Signs are different, so we find the difference. Difference of 5 and 9 is 4, but 9 is the greater value and it's negative, so we have negative 4. Notice in number 3 we have two negatives right next to each other, so that actually turns into 12 plus 3. Signs are the same, so we add them up. So we have 15. And number 4, same idea. Two negatives right next to each other, so we actually have negative 5 plus 6. Signs are different, so we find the difference. Keep the sign of the larger one. 6 is the biggest and it's positive, so it's positive 1. So for subtracting real numbers, we have to do what's called adding the opposite. So to get a better idea of what we mean by adding the opposite, we're going to look at this piece that's highlighted. Now, we have negative 4 plus 7, which is equal to negative 3. But if we add the opposite, we're actually taking the 4, we're leaving it alone. And what we mean by add the opposite is you'll see how negative 7 all of a sudden became plus negative 7 on the right side. So we added the opposite, which is plus negative 7. And then the same rules apply that we did for adding real numbers. So let's take a look at the next example, which is 8 minus 13. However you want to look at this, I tend to look at it as 8. If you have $8 and you go to the bank and borrow 13, what's going to end up happening is that you owe the bank $5. So you're negative $5 in your bank account because you owe them 5. We could add the opposite like we discussed, so we would leave 8 alone, and instead of having minus 13, we would add the opposite, so add, and the opposite of 13 is negative 13, and we'd come up with the same answer. The next thing we're going to discuss is absolute value. So absolute value measures the distance of a point to 0. For example, on a number line, the absolute value to negative 6 equals 6, because the distance from negative 6 to 0 is 6. Now, let me put this special note. Absolute values will always be equal to a positive number, because since it measures the distance, and we can't have a negative distance, therefore it will always be positive. So let's try this example problem. It says negative 5, the absolute value of 5 minus 6 times 2. So let's break this down slowly. Now when we do absolute value problems, you'll know that we always do Pemdas. Pemdas is always going to be used. There's never a time when we don't use it. So you have the absolute value of 5 minus 6 times 2. Now using Pemdas, we know that multiplication should go first. So 6 times 2 is 12. Now we have the absolute value of 5 minus 12. And the absolute value of 5 minus 12, we're just doing 5 minus 12. So the signs are different. So we're going to take 5 and subtract 12, or remember, if I had $5 and I took out 12 from the bank, I now owe the bank $7. And then the absolute value of 7 is just 7. And that's our final answer. So let's try a couple quick practice problems. In number 1, we have 5 minus 6. Now, we could look at it as I have $5 and then I borrowed 6. How much do we owe the bank? Or we could do our adding the opposite. So if we had 5 minus 6 and we add the opposite, we're going to add, and then the opposite of 6 is negative 6. And then we use our adding rules. Are the signs the same or different? They're different. So we find their difference, which is 1. The difference between 6 and 5 is 1, and we keep the sign of the larger number, which is negative, so negative 1. Number 2, notice how it already says 5 plus negative 6. So in actuality, we have the same exact problem as we did above, and with that said, you treat it the same exact way. So your answer would still be negative 1. Number 3, we have negative 7 minus 8. So using that bank analogy, if we borrowed 7 and then we borrowed 8 more, we borrowed a total of $15. Doing it the second way by adding the opposite, we're leaving the first number the same, and then we're adding the opposite of 8, which is negative 8, and then the adding rules apply. Are the signs the same? Yes, they are. Negative 7 and negative 8. Then we add them. 7 plus 8 is 15, and we keep their sign. Number 4, the absolute value of negative 4 should be 4. That should be an easy one. Then we have the absolute value of 5 minus 8. So if we add the opposite, we have 5 plus negative 8. And remember, the signs are different. So because the signs are different, we find their difference, which is 3. Keep the sign of the larger number, 8, and 8 is negative, so negative 3. And then the absolute value of negative 3 is just 3. Number 6, same idea. Absolute value of negative 3 minus 6. And if we add the opposite, we have negative 3 plus opposite of 6 is negative 6. So we get the absolute value of, now notice the signs are the same, so we're just going to add them up. So 3 plus 6 is 9 and keep their sign, which is negative. And the absolute value of negative 9 is just 9. Now it's your turn. Try solving this problem. Try solving these 6 problems and write them all down in your notes, and we'll check them tomorrow. That's all for now. I'll see you guys next time.